Okay, so welcome to Beauty of Colors podcast, Dr. Maria. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
It's nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. So tell the listeners about you and what was the driving force to you writing your memoir?
So, just a little bit about my background. I spent 38 years working in the field of human services before I retired in 2021. So, I worked in social services pretty much every aspect, working with individuals with behavioral health issues, substance abuse issues, older adults, both older adults in the prevention of elder abuse and also in community wellness programs. I spent a significant amount of my career working with at-risk youth and in child welfare. And so at the core of who I am, I'm a human services professional. I have an undergraduate degree from the North Carolina Central University, the best HBCU in the country. And I have a master's and a doctorate in management and leadership from the University of Phoenix. So, working in my field, what I pretty much committed my life to is working with vulnerable populations. And I had the fortune of rising through my career to work in executive leadership. And so, managing over 1,000 staff at many points in my career, serving on statewide committees that were responsible for providing services, supports, policies, and procedures, creating those for individuals so that we could make sure that they had equitable and appropriate services. And so I've always knew that working with others and giving back to the community was something that I always wanted to dedicate my life to. It was around 2021, 2020 when COVID hit that I really started thinking about finishing my memoir. I've been journaling for years because I find that is such a huge release to be able to journal and talk about some of your innermost feelings and thoughts. And I had shared some of my writings with a select few people because I also do motivational speaking. And in sharing those speeches, I really got inspired to finish writing my book. And so at the height of COVID, I was traveling back and forth between North Carolina and California, working for a week on site and working the rest of the time remotely here in North Carolina because I had just moved from the West Coast to the East Coast. And COVID was really a time for all of us to kind of reset and just kind of slow down a little bit. And I decided around that time that I would go ahead and retire and I would finish writing my book because I wanted to do what I hadn't done in my human services career in terms of working and trying to empower other people, is I really had not been taking care of myself. I really had not been taking care of my own social and emotional needs. And I knew it was time for me to start healing from the trauma that I experienced as a child. So writing this book was really a healing journey for me. It was really cathartic to be able to put it down on paper and to be able to release it, if you will.
Okay, so you talk about your childhood trauma. What influenced your career choice as a human service professional?
There are a couple of things. My parents, even though my parents separated when I was 7, my mom eventually became a nurse. I come from a family of nurses and I have 2 daughters that are nurses, a niece and a great niece that are nurses. My dad was pretty much the de facto father for many of the boys in the neighborhood that didn't have fathers. And my dad was always doing things for other people. It would be nothing for a kid to come to our house for the weekend and still be there a year or 2 later because that's how he was. So he was always doing things for people. So I think that my environment really led me to human services, but also my own internalized pain and shame and feelings of self-doubt because of the childhood trauma that I experienced. And I wanted to really kind of help others to be able to have the supportive services and resources. And I wanted to give back because it kind of made me feel better and helped me kind of resolve some of my own internal issues at the same time.
Okay. So how did that affect your mental wellness? Why did you take so long to deal with that childhood trauma in your life?
So anyone that experiences sexual assault is likely to go through the initial period of self-blame and shame, and internalized anger. And obviously, when you have these internalized feelings, it's going to impact your mental wellness. And my way of coping with it was drive, 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 achieve, 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 go, go, go. I'm always known for doing 900 things at one time because that was a good way to mask what I was dealing with. And so working in human services for 38 years, it allowed me to use the internal energy that I was feeling in terms of, the feelings of inadequacy and that really I wasn't good enough and that I was an imposter. It really allowed me to pour back into the people that I was working with, both my staff and both the people, in the community. And it really wasn't until, my 40s, until I was well into my career and also working on my doctorate. So doing a lot of things at one time. My husband was in Iraq. My daughter had twins, going to nursing school, working overnight. So I was keeping my grandkids overnight and trying to do all these things. And I just started feeling all of this anxiety. And because it's going to come out somewhere, somehow, somewhere along the way. We can only mask that and keep those internalized feelings for so long. And, and I think an important reason is that I didn't deal with it openly is because as a human services professional, I thought I could deal with it internally. I thought I could deal with it on my own. And I wasn't really ready to have that open conversation about what happened to me because there still was a lot of shame and there still was a lot of self-blame. And even though I knew in my mind that it wasn't my fault, I still felt some responsibility for what happened to me. And so it really just started to hit me, in my 40s that I had some of my own internal stress and trauma that I had to deal with in order to heal, which seems a little bit odd since I was already working in this field and had access to therapists and clinicians and those types of things. But I really didn't start having these open conversations about my trauma until I was in my 40s.
Okay. So where do you draw your faith from? Where does forgiveness fit in? And how does someone forgive their abuser?
My faith is very big part of my life. And when many people think about faith, they think about churches, right? And I don't believe that your faith is just limited to brick and mortar buildings. People express their faith in so many ways. It's through prayer, reading the Bible, silent time, meditation, mindfulness, yoga. And, there's so many periods in my life where my faith and my prayer just really kept me going. When I look back at my life, I know that it was the power of God that really has, allowed me to be here and to be in the place that I'm in today. And, forgiveness, I think, is one of the most important gifts that we can give to ourselves. Not necessarily to other people, but to ourselves. Because when you're not forgiving someone, you're holding this burden that you're carrying around in this invisible suitcase on your back that weighs about 200 pounds. Mm-hmm. And that forgiveness allows you to release so that you can kind of let go of those feelings. And realistically, forgiveness does not always mean forgetting every element, but it just means that you're going to release yourself from the bonds that individuals are holding over you because you're still angry at what happened, because you can't go back and change it. I'm never going to be 7, 8, 9, or 10 again. I'm 59 today. And part of my mental wellness really surrounds giving myself grace. I talk in my book about having to forgive my mom, having to forgive my dad, having to forgive myself. So that was really important to me, and understanding more about, the things that happened in my childhood, and how and why my parents parented, because I learned more about their own background and how they were raised. That really played a tremendous factor in me being able to release.
So you're saying, Maria, in order for you to move on and to be where you are today, forgiveness and faith played a big role in that.
Oh, absolutely. That forgiveness is so powerful, because otherwise you hold this anger, right? And that anger is right there in every aspect. And I choose to wake up and be happy. I choose to wake up and know that I've done so much and so well beyond that I let it define who I believed I was, psychologically, for so long, that I didn't want to carry around that burden anymore. And but that power of prayer, I have a chapter in my book that says, all things are working for my good, because I know that if it was not for the power of God, that I don't know where I would be right now. And sometimes I would say, listen, God, I know you're trying to give me a message. If you send me a text message or call me or something, let me know, what you're trying to tell me right now, because I don't really understand. But I know that he's always there.
Okay. So let's go to your memoir. In one of your chapters, you devoted one of your chapters to sharing positive affirmations. Why was
Yes.
that so important to you?
Because I believe that you become who you say you are. You
So
know,
true.
I mean, I say, I'm strong, I'm smart, I'm confident, I'm amazing, I'm enough. Whatever affirmations resonate with people are the ones that I advise them to use. When we were growing up, we were told, oh, don't be overconfident and don't be arrogant and don't be so cocky. But the way that we carry ourselves determines how we allow other people to treat us. And so I want to believe that I am an amazing person. I'm not a perfect person. I'm not a person that has not made mistakes, but I am still amazing. And I am still intelligent. And I am still confident. I am still spiritual. I'm still forgiving. I'm an achiever. I've done well in my life. All of these positive things that we have to tell ourselves, because so many times people start off with the negative things. Oh my gosh, my hair is not perfect today. Oh, these pants, they just are not fitting me right. Oh my God, I did not get that promotion. This person, and they just don't like me. As opposed to saying, what God has for me is going to be for me. Maybe this relationship is not the relationship that is meant for me right now. Hey, I'm going to change this outfit because it's not fitting me the way that I like. So if we can reframe some of that negativity and talk about positive affirmations, I surround myself with positive affirmations. There's no room that you can go to in my house that does not have a positive affirmation, because I believe that you are what your environment allows you to be. And I create my environment.
Wow, sounds great.
Yeah.
So what does healing out loud, what does that mean to you? What is it all about?
So I recently did a TEDx talk in Wilmington, Delaware in December, and it was titled Healing Out Loud, because there's a certain stigma that's associated with some things in the Black community. And I would venture to say that you probably heard the phrase, what happens in our household stays in our household. We don't talk about mental illness. We don't talk about multi-generational cycles of dysfunction that include sexual abuse. According to the Center for Disease Control, I'm going to share some statistics with you. 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 13 boys has been sexually abused by the time they turn 18 years of age. Over 90% of those perpetrators are family members or known family friends. So this is not stranger danger. This is people in our household, in our community, at our schools, at our play groups, in our churches, at our friend's house when we allow our kids to spend the night, in our own homes. And until we start talking about these things and educating ourselves and educating our children, we're not going to be able to break that cycle. So healing out loud for me means authentically talking about my story and how it has impacted me throughout my life. Also, in the Black community, we don't talk about mental health because what we say is, if you have mental health issues, your faith is not strong enough. You need to pray about it. Our ancestors have been through so much more. We should be able to handle this. Oh, there's nothing wrong. Everybody goes through something. You're going to be okay. And with that, we brush it off. And so when I talk about healing out loud in my TED Talk, I created an acronym, AARP, and not the American Association for Retired Persons, but A for acknowledging that what happened to me, A for accepting that what happened to me was not my fault, R for being able to release the anger that I held for the people that I felt like did not protect me, and P for post-traumatic growth, which is a continuous journey that I'm on to continue to heal and to get better. I live with anxiety every day. And that healing out loud means discussing it. It means sharing my story so that other people can understand that sometimes it's okay not to be okay. I'm trying to work with the Black community to be more open about mental health, because that does not define who you are. That's a part of who you are, but that does not define who you are. I've spoken at some churches, and one of the things that I say to them is that, you know, God would not be pleased if we don't use the tools that He provides to us. And those tools include clinicians, psychiatrists, therapeutic interventions. It also includes mindfulness and yoga, and whatever practices a person can use in order to get to their process of healing. And so that healing out loud is really about sharing, releasing that shame and that stigma. I want people to know that you can live in the suburbs, you can travel abroad, you can be educated, you can wear designer clothes and designer shoes, and you can still have anxiety or cyclical depression. That it's okay if we acknowledge that, because that's the only way that we're going to get the services and supports that we need.
Wow. So do you see some progress in the Black community? Because what I have realized is that with COVID, a lot of people was affected by it. And a lot of people right now are coming out and talking about their mental stability and their mental health. Do you see some progress in the Black community? Do you see more Black individuals coming out and talk about that?
I am seeing more progress, and I follow a group called Therapy for Black Men, and there's also therapy for Black women, and there's a lot more openness in these conversations, especially with men, which is so important. You know, as we know in the Black communities, there's already so many societal things that we are dealing with today. And so I think that we all have a role in our communities, in our churches, in our schools and universities, to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to educate. One of the biggest things that I see that isn't a challenge in the Black community is access to care, access to mental health services. There's these disparities, and there's also these inequities. And many people in the Black community, or whatever culture, you want to be served by someone who looks like you. And there's not a plethora of African American or people of color who are clinicians in our communities. So there are also those inequities. But what I will say, and this is what I tell people a lot, is, you know, when we say that we have a stomach ache or a headache, or we have an injury, we go to our primary care physicians and they're not always Black. So please do not let that be the reason why you don't go see a therapist, because you cannot find a Black therapist, because you do have therapists that are not of color that understand our culture. So if you can get culturally appropriate services and people really understand our background and some of the things that also we bring into the room that are the silent aspects of who we are, then I think that's also important. So I do see more people talking about it. I am a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and one of our 5 programmatic thrusts is around physical and mental health. So there's a lot of work that's being done in communities across the globe that really focus on mental health as an important aspect of our daily life. I'm glad that we're having this conversation as we are, because May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I personally think that all the months that precede and follow May should also be, you know, Mental Health Awareness Month, because this is so important, because as we know, the psychological aspect of the pain that we experience is going to impact us physiologically. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Adverse Childhood Experiences Survey. It's the ACEs study. Are you familiar with that?
No, I've never heard about it.
So the Adverse Childhood Experience study was done in the 90s, and it was done between Kaiser Permanente and the Center for Disease Control. And so they looked at about 17,000 people that were part of a health maintenance organization, all in San Diego, California. And so during the study, they decided to ask 10 questions about things that individuals had experienced between the ages of 0 and 17 years old. Those 10 things include: did a parent or someone in your household, an adult, often swear at you? Did they act in a way that made you feel like you were going to be physically hurt? Did a parent or someone in the household push, grab, slap, or throw something at you? Did an adult or a person at least 5 years older than you attempt to touch you in any sexually inappropriate manner? Did you often feel that you were not loved in your family, or that your family did not look out for each other? Did you often feel like you maybe did not have enough to eat or clean clothes to wear? Were your parents ever too drunk or intoxicated to take care of you? Were your parents separated or divorced? Were any of your parents or any of the adult caregivers in your home often hit, grabbed, slapped, or threw something at them? Did you live with anyone who had a problem with substance abuse? Was a household family member depressed or mentally ill? And did you have a household member that went to prison? And so according to the researchers, 1 in 3 Americans has at least one yes to these 10 questions. And what they indicate is that if you answer yes to 4 or more of these questions, then this unresolved trauma, which means that you didn't necessarily get the support that you needed, and sometimes maybe you still did, that you are more likely to have sex by the time that you're age 15. You may be involved in a domestic violence relationship. You may have substance abuse issues. You may have depression, anxiety, or other mental health disorders. And from the physiological standpoint, you're more at a higher risk for obesity, diabetes, cancer, stroke, and other physiological issues. And so my score was a 5. And so understanding these adverse childhood experiences and how they can affect us in our adulthood is very, very important, which is why I administer this questionnaire through a jot form at my Sip and Heal events. Because when I first was exposed to the Adverse Childhood Experiences Survey, And I had a master's degree at the time when I first went to an educational training about it. And I was like, wow, this is what's wrong with me. This is what's going on with me. And this was around the time when I started to recognize and accept some of the reasons why sometimes I felt the way that I did, or sometimes why I was having this anxiety, which I didn't even identify as anxiety at the time, or sometimes when I would have that cyclical, depression, then I would understand that. And so as we talk about educating ourselves, within the community, we need to really understand how things that happen in our childhood really impact us as adults, because that's the only way that we can break those multi-generational cycles of dysfunction.
Wow. Well said. Well said. That is so true, Maria. So where can the listeners get a copy of your memoir? And do you have any other resources that you can refer the listeners to?
Yes, so here is a copy of my memoir, Getting to My Enough, a story of faith, resilience, and survival. And it can be purchased on my website as well at www.mercadelconsultingsolutions.net. And also on my website, I have a list of resources because I believe it's important for people to know where to go for help. And so those resources include Therapy for Black Men, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, RAIN, NAMI, and other resources. That's so key and that's so critical. And now they have Cerebral and other online organizations or entities that you can have therapy online and you don't have to be in person. So transportation is not an issue. You can sit right in front of your computer, it's confidential, and you can get support that way. The reason why I make sure that these resources are available is because every 11 minutes, one person commits suicide.
Yeah.
And if you think about that, 1 in 11 people, that's huge. So we have a responsibility, I think, as a community and as a society, to make sure that we are doing our part to let people know that it's okay to not be okay. We all, scan the internet and get really involved when we see that some high-level celebrity has committed suicide. And, oftentimes you have no idea what happened with them because we don't know them. And at the same time, we're not aware that it's happening in our own community. And that there's someone that we might be able to reach out to. So I often tell people at my events, take this list of resources because you may not need it, but hold on to it because you might know another individual that may need it, and you might need to be able to refer them to this list of resources.
Okay. So do you have any last words for the listeners and for other people who are suffering or who have suffered at the hands of their abusers?
I absolutely do. And that is, you deserve to heal. And you are enough. And we have to be able to, and it's not an easy process. I don't want anyone to think that, hey, I just woke up and everything was fine, because there's still some days when I'm dealing with the reciprocal feelings. And even writing this book, there were a lot of triggers. But I want people to know that, there's help available and that they can heal. I don't, want anyone to have any level of despair where they think that they cannot go on. Healing is possible. And what has happened to you does not define, who you are, but get the necessary help that you need to be okay. And I know that you can make it. If you want to put in the work and get the help that you need, I know that you can make it.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Dr. Maria, for sharing this with us. And I hope the listeners do go on your website and get your memoir and pass it along to their family and friends.
And I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you and to share my story with your listeners.